Hello, my name is Ed Ford. Welcome to Give Your Walls Some Soul, a painting show designed to relieve your inhibitions about oil painting. Today, our hostess, San Benito County's famous artist, will give some grapes some soul. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Shannon Grissom.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Ed, and thanks, David Huboy, on the guitar. Good job, guys. I'm here today just to show you how to paint. Have a good time, and don't worry about trying to do a straight line. I have so many people coming up to me and say, "Oh, I can't be an artist. I don't know how to draw a straight line." Well, you know, that's what rulers are for. So we're just going to get in and paint today. First thing we're going to do is take a look at how we start the process, or how I start anyway. I went out, and in this age of technology, I shot a digital disc of several still lifes that I had set up. And in real time, it took me about 2 or 3 hours to set up a still life that I liked. Then I shot a disc full of images. Then I picked the image that I liked. And even within the image that I liked, I decided that I didn't want to do the whole thing, at least not on TV. So what I did, this is the low-tech part. You take a mat board, and you cut it in half. This is a mat. Cut it in half on the miter. And that way you can crop your image till you get the image that you like. So today we're going to pick just part of the grapes and give some grapes some soul. And I've cropped the image here to show you what it's going to be like when we get the finished product. So Ed, can you go ahead and hand me the blank canvas? Thank you. In the interest of time, you know what, I'm going to need that for reference. Didn't think about that. In the interest of time, I drew a rough sketch out so that I could see basic placements for the grapes. I'm going to the basement to get my knife now. Okay, so I've got a basic outline of where I want the grapes to go. Where do you start on a painting? Some people say you start in the background. Some people say you start in the foreground, left to right, back to front. And for me, the thing that I do is I start with the thing that I know how to do, and I sneak up on what scares me. And by the time I get to the part that it scares me, I forget that it scares me, and I just start painting it. So what's real easy to do in this case is the background. So I'm going to go ahead and mix some colors for the background. We've got red grapes, so I'm going to use a complementary color of red and green to make a wash of a background to get in there. So the basic palette that I like to use is pretty much 7 colors with a few pusher colors. So I've got white, alizarin crimson, permanent rose, cad red light, cad yellow deep, cad yellow light, French ultramarine blue, and permanent green. Now you'll notice I don't have any earth colors up there, and even though I can paint earth color type things, I mix all those colors. I don't use those straight out of the tube. It's not that this palette is any better or worse than any other way of painting. It's just the one that I like. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is mix some background color. I'm going to take alizarin crimson, which is that nice red. And it's going to be a blacky kind of color. Mix it with this permanent green. And this makes a real rosy, dark color. I'm going to thin it down with a lot of painting medium so that it's really runny. Okay, that's great. The only problem is this is really close to the color of the grapes, so nothing's going to happen here if I put this down. So I'm just going to grab a bunch of green and put it in and mix it right on the canvas with there. So the thing that I know I can do is the background. I can scribble that in. Don't have to worry about how good or bad it is. Oil is a very forgiving medium. And the way that I paint is I do a lot of painting, and I work on several paintings at once, let them dry, and then do lots of different layers over them until I get the desired result. I don't usually paint all in one shot. Okay, so we've got, and I was also conscious when I laid out this design of the space around the interstitial space. I don't like to call it negative because negative is negative. So I'd rather call it interstitial. This is the space that's not the subject. And I'm as conscious of the space that I have here as I am of the subject. If you place the grapes in the wrong place, it looks really bad. Later in the show, I'll show you a painting where I really didn't set it up very well, and it came out okay, and I'll show you how I fixed it. But it was all based on not what I painted or how I painted, but where I placed it. So if the composition's bad, which is part of the placement, then you spend the rest of the painting trying to make it look pretty to cover up for it. So it really is important to get that right. So that's why it took me 4 hours to get the still life set up, and another several hours just to get the place to where, you know, the photo to where I liked it. Okay, so we're getting this, and you can see lots of the red and green swirling in here. It's nice to have a little variation. I didn't put enough paint out, and I'll have to squeeze some more out, which is, you know, I don't worry about not mixing enough paint, because if I had the same color everywhere, it would be really, really boring. So I'll just throw in a little bit more. You know, getting ready for this show, and this is our first show together, I was trying to do the perfect painting, just get everything perfect before I got here. And long about this morning, I realized that wasn't going to happen. So, I read a quote, and basically it said that, you know, if you wait to do anything until you are perfect, you're never going to get anything done. And if I waited to paint or even show people how to paint until I felt like everything was perfect, I'd never get anywhere. So basically, I want people to go out and try it. It's not hard. It's lots of fun. And you can give your walls some soul instead of staring at some white, naked walls. Okay, so we're getting this. And you know what? You can see how did you see how big this brush is? I'm using a big brush. You always want to use the biggest one you can that makes you feel slightly uncomfortable. Otherwise you're holding it like a pencil, and your rigidness will show in your work. Same thing when you squeeze paint out on the palette. If you're only squeezing a little tiny bit and you're trying to just make sure you don't waste any of it, all that energy shows up on the canvas. It says, hey, I'm scared. I don't want to do this. Also with the brush strokes, you'll see that I went right over the lines that I drew, because you don't want your brush strokes to go into the grape and hurry up and run away because they're afraid. I mean, that'll show up too. It's like you have all these things but. So just say, oh, that's okay, I'm right into it, and you can overlap later. Okay. So we're getting the background in. I'm pretty happy with the interstitial space. When I start mixing colors, I start off being really pure, kind of like if you were writing an essay longhand, where the first part of it's equal and lined up and just nice. But then as I start painting, all my color mixes get compromised, but that's okay. It's just part of the process. Yeah, it is called, that says it's personality. It's soul. It's giving your wall some soul. And I'll add a little red down here, because anytime I get into trouble, I think there's nothing a little red can't fix. You'll see as you go through the episodes, it's one of my favorite colors. Okay, so I'm just scribbling this in. I'm not taking great care to see what happens here. I just want to get this background in. And I'm going to take now, in the studio at home, I have a mirror, so I can stand right here, look in the mirror, and I don't have to move to see how well this is working. I don't have a mirror there, so I can't see exactly what's happening here. So I'm actually going to get back from my work a little bit. And since it's the background, it's not really necessary. I can't see anything yet either. It doesn't look like anything to me either. It's not like I see something you don't. So I'll get back. But it is important to get back from your work so that you can see what's really going on. Okay. Now that was the part that was easy, not intimidating at all. The next part is, let's get some of these, you know what I didn't put down? I didn't put down any purple. That's another color I really like. So I'm going to squeeze out some purple. You notice I don't use black. I feel like I get richer darks by mixing my blacks. So I'm going to use purple as one of my darkest. Carbazole violet I like, or dioxazine purple, to get one of my darker darks in. Now to get the shape of the grapes, instead of outlining them, which when I first started painting grapes, I would think that that's what I'd want to do, is to start outlining each grape to see where I'm at. But that's not what I'm really looking at. What I'm looking at are, where are the dark spots? I don't know if you can see this, but where are the dark spots in the grapes? So I'm seeing some big dark masses rather than the circles of the grapes. One other tool that I use to help me see where the darks and lights are in a picture is that I'll print a black and white copy, and that gets rid of all the color, and then I can tell, oh, it's dark here, it's light there, and I know where to punch it up and where to let it kind of fade into the background. Yeah?
What hints do you have about setting up interesting still lifes? It looks like you spend a lot of time setting that up. What tips would you have?
The question was, how do you set up your still lives?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the biggest tip for setting up a still life is the lighting. I set these grapes up, and you can see there was a sunny window, so the light source is coming here. So I could have set them up in the studio with a single light source, but you're always going to have conflicting light sources. So this was natural light, one light source, the sun, through an open window, and that way I didn't have mixed. When you set it up in the studio, you might have turned all the lights off, but you still have your studio light, plus you have other lights that might be conflicting, and it makes things confusing. It's hard to get a sense of shape and form. So, and my favorite thing is to get things to look three-dimensional. So I would say the lighting is the most important. Other things that I did when I was setting up this particular still life is that I made sure that the grapes were overlapping the picture, and the direction of, I am going to paint this whole thing eventually, the direction of these lines here are actually pointing all toward the still life. So I'm in effect directing traffic. I'm saying, here, look at me, look at this area. Everything here in the darkest areas of the still life is not pointing anywhere at all, because that's just kind of a resting place for the eyes. I want the eyes to go right toward this light spot. So even the folds were strategically placed so that it would create more drama. The more drama you have in setting up your still life, the more drama, the more your painting's going to have. And there's nothing worse than a boring painting. And I've painted those, and we have a dump in Hollister called John Smith, and I like to say that I have several in the John Smith collection. I'm not above throwing them out. So, okay, very good question. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to start putting in of course I threw my reference photo over here. I'm going to throw in my darks. So where do I see the darkest thing? Not necessarily around the outline of the grapes, but there's like dark stuff in between the grapes. And you'll see, I'm not holding this like a pencil. I'm not being ultra careful about where I'm putting this stuff. I know that this is a dark blob. How technical is that? I'm looking for shapes. I'm not drawing, I'm painting. So I'm looking for dark blobs, and that will help create the form. So I got a dark blob there. Where else do I have a dark blob? So, and sometimes it is that methodical. Where do I have a dark blob? For me, looking at this thing, it's actually easier at this point in time, in this earlier point in time, to find out where I have the light blobs. So I'm going to switch gears and paint some light blobs. I'm going to take white paint. If you put straight white paint and use that for your light, it's going to be too cold. White is too cold. So you always have to add some yellow or red to it. I like Cad Yellow Deep. It's a nice color to warm it up. If you really want to warm it up, Indian Yellow too is also very nice. Okay, so this color is still, it's very light. It looks almost white, but it's a lot warmer than the white that comes straight out of the tube. This is going to help me decide where these grapes' borders are, where the light's hitting them. Okay, I'm going to take another brush. Still, I'm not using tiny brushes. They're still pretty big. Of course, I'm painting big too, but even on smaller canvases, I would use the bigger brushes. It helps me be looser. My very first teacher told me I was the queen of over-blending. I still have to battle against that. And I would get something really loose and nice, and then as I was trying to make it better, I would just make it boring. And I still have to combat against that. And one way to do that is to use bigger brushes. I did one painting, an entire painting with a 3-inch putty knife and no brushes at all, and that helped me totally loosen up. And it actually worked. Okay, we got light here. See, now that's don't need to draw a straight line for that. Another light there. Another light here. Light here. Now at this stage, it's okay that I'm pretty much giving them all the same color and all the same weight as far as where the light's hitting them. When you get closer to the end, you got to start varying some of that, because not every grape can be the star. You've got to have somebody that's standing out more than others, otherwise they're all going to be pretty flat. This has got a little more orange to it, a little red. This has got a little white there. I'm going right into that. I don't care that it's picking up the other color, that's adding some interest. There's some light here. I also paint more. The whites, I painted a lot thicker than I do the other part of the painting, because then I can cut into it later. See, once you go into another part that's the stem, it's going to pick up the other color. So I can go, it's easier for me to go over the top of that and cut it out with a darker color than it is to go, when you put white over this, you're just going to get a medium. So that helps keep it clean.
If it blends too much, do you have to wait till it dries before you fix it?
You can try and fix it, but for the most part, the question was, you can.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely wait till it dries. In fact, I'm going to get this to a certain point and show you what I was able to get done in an hour and how I go over the top of it when you've got a completely dry painting. So we've got this. Now on this side, it really shouldn't be this warm because this is more reflected light, but I'm just putting lights down. Okay, there's light there, not too much light there. And I really do start out this sloppy. That's just telling me where that goes. Okay. The other thing is, what am I seeing? If you have something that's dark, medium, and light, that helps create form and it helps turn it. But grapes have reflected light. They're like painting people. So if you can paint his nose, you can paint a grape. And if you can paint his grape, you can paint his nose. It's really the same kind of thing. I don't know if Santa agrees with me, but it's okay, you can't talk. Okay, so we pretty much have all the lights down. I'm going to probably have to tone that down. Is there anybody else that's light up here? No. Okay, let's get some red down because that always makes me feel better. Some alizarin crimson. Some cad red light. Ooh, that's fire engine red. That's probably way too red, but I think I'll end up toning it down when I get into my... I know how to compensate for the things that I do. So because I know I'll overblend, I can compensate by putting a little too much down, and then when I mix the other color, it should be okay. You notice between the mixes, I wipe my knife to make sure that I have a clean mix for the next one. The other thing that you'll probably notice is most painting shows you see somebody using 1 or 2 brushes, that's it, and they clean it between strokes. Well, because I don't use any turpentine or anything toxic when I paint, I've got to use a whole mess of brushes, because at the end of the day, when I'm through painting, I clean my brushes I mix them with canola oil, or in this case today olive oil because I ran out, and then I mix them with Dawn dishwashing detergent, and that's how I clean my brushes. I do not use the turpentine. So unfortunately, because I do it that way, I've got to use a lot of brushes because I cannot mix the canola oil or the olive oil with my painting. It would wreck the molecular structure of the paint. So that's why you see me getting clean brushes for different colors and having a million brushes out here. Okay, another big fat brush. Now one way to, if you were to put straight red here, it's just going to be too bright, and you just wouldn't see grapes that way unless they were really plastic, and then I guess you would see grapes that way. But what I'm going to do is I'm toning the red down with its opposite on the color wheel, which would be the permanent green, or I also like to tone it down with a little bit of dioxazine purple. So I'm seeing how that works. Oh, that's nice. That's working. And we'll make some that are a little brighter. There's some red there. That one's really bright, so he might. Now, as far as who's going to be the star, I'm thinking this area here, basically, is going to be the center of interest, so I'm going to make these brighter.
I have a question.
Yes?
When you're painting, do you worry about getting the exact color that you see in the photograph, or are you just kind of going for the idea of what?
You know what? That's a really good question. She asked, when I'm painting, do I worry about getting the exact color that's in the photograph? When I first started painting, I painstakingly tried to match every single color that I saw. And I know people that actually paint that way, but that didn't really fit in my personality. I don't have that kind of patience. So what I do is I get it to where I think it's going to be close enough, and it's like sculpting. I give and take a little back and forth till I get what I want. But having said that, I did so many color exercises where if you cut a hole, here's a good way of doing it. I'm going to rip a hole in this. You cut a hole in a little piece of paper like this, and you hold it out at arm's length, and you look at an object. What it does is it isolates all the surrounding colors so that all you can see is the color of the object. And what I would do when I first started painting is I would mix and mix and mix so that when the color that was on my palette knife matched what I could see through here, then I knew that I totally nailed the color. And I did so many exercises like that that I actually trained my eye to see that color. So I now know what I have shortcut that process because I did so many. One of my teachers would make me match paint samples till I was blue in the face until I could actually see the color. So now it's not that I don't try to match a color, but I don't have to go through that process anymore. But this is real helpful to actually see. It's amazing if you start looking at this copper pot or the colors that are here, there's just a lot of color reflecting off that are not seen unless you isolate what's around it. So this is a really good tool. I typically use just an old piece of cardboard. I'm not quite this crude, but you know, a little hole puncher, and that works. So very good question. Thank you. Okay, so now we have just like this abstract blob, and I'll keep putting some red down. Okay, make it a little darker down here. One of my teachers, Michael, used to say that when you're painting, you do your thinking before you approach the canvas. After you start painting, unless you walk back and take a step back and take a look at it, that while you're painting, you should really just be in the painting process. You shouldn't be thinking about what you're doing, which is really good because it's hard to think and do this at the same time. So eventually that'll come out. Ooh, that's dark, but you know what? That's all in the shadow part. And see, just by moving the brush with a little bit of red on there, that caused some of that to show up. Okay. One thing you have to do with some of these canvases that have bars in here is to actually put your hand back here, because otherwise you'll see it lying. That'll show up from when you're, here, I'll show you what happens. It'll actually show you this indentation in there, so you got to guard for that. Okay, we're starting to get something. So we're sneaking up on the shape of these grapes. I'm going to add some more lights in here, and then we'll fill it in. Now, if you add just white to red, all it does is make it pink. And so you've got to add some orange to it or yellow in order to make it a warm red. And I accidentally just picked up some purple, and it messed up my whole mix. So you just say, oh well, and start again. Okay, this is more orange than I want, but again, I'm going to be going into some of that other stuff, so it'll be all right in the end. There's another thing going on here that I probably should have explained at first. Well, there went my knife. I like the color of these grapes better than this, so I'm actually going more toward this side here. So I used to try to reproduce every single thing that was in the photograph, and now I get my ideas from my still life, I get my ideas from my photographs, but I just paint what feels good. You know, this is going to make me happier. So it's a lot more creative. So let me go get the knife out of the trash. Okay, it picked up a new color. And you know what, I can cover a lot more area with a big fat brush, so that'll be faster. Okay, so there's some light here, light here. That might be a little too peachy, but we can always fix that. Okay, Ed, how are we doing on time?
I think we're doing fine.
Great.
Right,
Okay, I'm going to
right at
pick up
30.
a little more medium. I'm turning it away because I don't think I'm supposed to say any brand names. I love this stuff when it opens. Okay. I guess I would have to say this is toxic. I only use a little bit at a time. And you know, the other nice thing about not using the toxic thing is I can have several painters in the class at the same time, or come over to my studio and paint, and we're not, just because you use odorless thinner doesn't mean it's any less toxic, so you just can't smell it. So it's nice you can get a bunch of people in the studio and not hurt
Pass
yourselves. Yeah, not pass out. Okay, so these are like way more orange, so we're gonna get the pink and the reds back going again. And you know what, it just needs some straight alizarin. I am not above using straight tube color if that's what it calls for. You know, that's what it's telling me. So when I'm getting the canvas covered for the first time, I call it a first statement. Ooh, that's pretty. You know, I can be mean to myself while I'm painting and just really beat myself up about things that I did wrong. But on the other hand, I'm really good when I like something. So I can see that this is gonna work. What I'm going to do now is you would continue in this fashion until you got the whole canvas covered. And basically you would go on and on and on until, with each little grape, until basically all the spaces were covered and everything was, the whole canvas was covered. And then I would let it dry. So Ed, let's trade canvases right now.
Okay.
This is really, watch yourself. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, this is what I was able to do in 1 hour. And I guess, this took me an hour to do this. And that's without talking to anybody. So in television time, it probably would have taken me 2 hours to actually get to that point. So basically, I kept filling in the holes, and maybe I should show one grape to show you how I blended it. But yeah, let's bring the canvas back for just 1 minute, because that's almost too big a gap to see how did I do this. And if you wouldn't mind grabbing that brush down there on the floor.
You bet.
Thanks. Okay, I'll get one brush done. One grape done. Okay, so what I would have done is I would have taken a dry brush that had no paint on it. That's scruffy, got to be scruffy so it'll grab the paint. And so what these are these, only I blended this stuff together. That's really the only difference. So I would take each one and blend it. And of course, I would have to put the darks in the same place too, so you'd see where the separation is. And this is not, you know, the interesting thing is you'll notice this is not quite the same composition as this. Because first of all, I can't draw it the same exactly this. And for two reasons. One, I don't think I'm capable of it, and two, it would hurt my soul to have to paint the same exact thing over and over. So basically, I like this composition. I think the thing that I would do differently with this, now that I can see where I'm going with this, is I don't like this space here. I think I'd add a little more here. And just kind of work that out so that I'm getting more of a different space here. But that's how you get it to that point. Okay, Ed, we'll go to step 2. Okay, thanks. Okay, now this has sat in my studio for well over a week. It's really, really dry. So I can do some glazing over the top of it. And glazing really helps things pop. Wow, I'm just got paint everywhere. See, this is really what happens. Okay, so I'm going to take a clean brush, lots of medium, and you got to decide here, okay, who's going to be the star, who's not going to be the star. Right now, everybody seems to have equal weight, which is pretty much how I blocked it all in. You know, you got your lights over here. There aren't too many grapes that are saying, hey, I'm the star, or you know, hey, let's pick on me. So I'm going to take some purple. Why purple? Okay, I could use ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue is really grainy, so when you glaze over it, sometimes it leaves a little grain in there, so we don't like it. Purple is good, yeah.
Could you explain what glazing is?
Yes, she was asking what glazing is. That's a really good question. What I was doing before was I was blocking in the painting with direct paint motion. This is, the application that I'm doing now is glazing. I dipped my brush in so much medium that it looks like the consistency of ink. So it's really see-through. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go wild over the top of the canvas and just, you know what, these guys have to be in the background. You know, I'm painting right over this nice stuff, right? And this has got to get hidden, and this has got to calm down a little bit. And oh, he's way down in the shadow. You know, I don't want that. In fact, this whole left side from down here really shouldn't have that much to say. We've got to pop this out. Now, what glazing is you can still see through what I was doing. Well, you will be able to when I'm done. But I'm putting a light coat, and that's affecting, it's pushing this back and bringing this forward. So let's see, some of these grapes need to get hidden so that that'll pop. These two, because they're close to the edge of the canvas, I'm not going to have them, even though the light's hitting them in the photograph. This is a case where, okay, the light's hitting him in the photograph, that's great, it's fine in the photo, but it doesn't work in the painting. I'm not too sure about this one either. I may tone him down. I don't like just these two. You should always have 3, or even I may just block, I may work with that. I'm constantly fixing the composition and just molding it till I get it to the place that I like it. Okay, so we scribbled paint over there. That's like the real technical word for glazing. Now what I'm going to do is take a paper towel, wipe off the excess. Okay, so that's kind of faded into the background. That's nice. The other thing is there needs to be some push and pull in the background. What I mean by push and pull are darks and lights. And I'm putting that right over the green. And I'm thinking about, these grapes are doing a little twisty shape. And I want to accentuate the rhythm. Paintings have rhythm. And so I want to accentuate this rhythm by accentuating the twist with the stuff that's in the background. So it's kind of going in that little S shape. And then a little hair. And the nice thing is if I go crazy on some of this and I don't quite like it, well, I'll wait till it dries and do some more glazing or paint directly over it. Yeah, and I know a lot of artists who try to be perfect, and it's funny, I read a quote somewhere where they were talking about heroes. You don't expect heroes to be perfect. They're full of tragic flaws, so why should artists have to be? Mm-hmm. Just go out there and do it. Are you having fun? That's really what counts. Are you having fun? And sometimes when you're not paying attention, real pretty things happen. Okay, notice I was bold. I went right over the top of that. I'm not worried about whether I get paint there or not. I am worried about leaving a thick ridge because this is not my last paint application. So what I do is I go over the edge here so that if I change my mind and I decide I don't want this grape at all and I paint over it, you're not going to see this ghost ridge of where the grape was. So it's okay to kind of go over that, but you don't want to leave these bumpy ridges until the very, I don't commit till the end. Because you know what, I change my mind a lot. It's okay. Okay.
Most women do.
Yeah, that's the woman's prerogative here. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I like that, I like that. Maybe a little too much, I went kind of crazy on that. That's okay. Now is at the point where I definitely need to stand back and see where I'm at so I can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to get back a little bit. This is where I really wish I had my mirror. Okay, well, it did make some pop. Some of them I made recede that really didn't need to. So I think we're going to get rid of this one. He's too... So you can still see that it's light down there, but it's not bright. When I'm looking at an object, I'm asking myself, is it light or bright? Or is it light or dark? Is it bright or dull? And yeah, there's a little bit of light here on these grapes, but they're not bright. It's reflected light. And I think I want this guy in the shadow too. So he looks like he's under there. Okay, so let's get some straight alizarin. And now I'm going to glaze with another color. What I do with my grapes is I glaze over and over and over with a series of colors till I get them just to where I want them, where it looks like you could grab them. Okay, and I'm running out of big fat brushes. I'm going to use one that already has paint on it. What the heck? Okay. Let's see if this alizarin's strong enough. Okay, that's a nice color. Oh, I like that. Okay. Now, the tendency, and what I'm really tempted to do, is do this on every single grape. And what would happen, I mean, it's like you want to make things tidy and make them all uniform. But, grapes are like people. They got all different bodies. They all look different. And if you did that, they would get to that plastic-looking thing, and I don't want that. I want them to have personality. I want them to have soul. So I almost go around the canvas, not in an orderly fashion, but more like lug nuts. Because if I go in an orderly fashion, I'm going to do the same thing to every single grape. I don't want them to be the same. I want them to have some personality. I want them to look different. I'm still kind of, let's see, this side, these grapes over here should be less pronounced. This looks a little awkward there. I'm just going to go right over that. I love that red over that's just happy. There are times, too, it's not like I can fix everything. There are times when things are not happy and I have so much negative energy into the painting that I'm doing. That's when I throw them out. I don't paint over them because I feel like they're ugly underneath, and I know it. I know they're hiding under there. So, okay, so that's good because this has kind of obscured this, although I want it to pop a little bit. There's something going on there. What's going on here? This one. The closer you get to being finished, the more you have to do a little and stand back. You can't just, because what happens is I'll do all this really nice stuff and overblend it, and it'll be gone before I even knew that I did too much. So at this stage, a lot of times I will paint looking in the mirror because it gives me that distance, and I can see right away that I'm either overdoing or underdoing. And I had one painting teacher said, well, if I told you a little bit was good, you'd think a lot is better, and that's kind of how I paint, and it doesn't always, that's not always a good thing. So I'm going to get back and see if they're starting to work. Yeah, they're starting to get some more form. We've got these that are definitely more of a center of interest. Okay, Ed, let's go on to the next painting. Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm. This is stage 3. Okay, so you can see they're considerably blended, and I would say, to my taste, I overblended them. Yes, they have form. You can definitely I would say the good parts of this and where it's at this point is that they definitely have form. You can see the definition between the individual grapes. But I took, in blending them, I took some of the character, I took some of the soul out of that. So I would like to give it more. I don't know if I can because I've been working on it every day for how dry it is, whether I can do that. It's kind of dry to the touch. But I'm going to put a little bit of soul in here and see what happens. Yeah, see, little loose brush strokes. That's the trick right there. Putting something like that down and then walking away from it and letting it go. My tendency is to do what I did with all these grapes and tidy it up and make it pretty, but that was just, to me, this painting was close. It has interesting things going on, but that one in its raw state, this other painting that I was just working on, had more soul for me. So I'm going to just add some stuff here and force myself not to blend it. Oops. Well, you know what? This is one of those whoops that actually worked out good. Grapes have mold and yeast on them, and this white that I didn't want in there is actually a yeasty kind of color, so that's okay. And I'm going to just kind of blend that in. A little bit is good. Okay. The other thing is we've got not a lot of contrast between dark and light in the background. You want to make these pop some more. I'll leave that light there. Okay, I have to see how that's looking. Hey. Oh, I like that little bit of red that was still in the brush. Okay, the thing that can happen, or that does happen, is that I could, I would say, talked about over blending, I could do the same thing with the background, put another whole coat, and end up with the same thing that I did before. So this is another case where I've got to learn to, see how it's bending the canvas here? I've got to learn to walk away and see what I'm doing here. Okay, so there's some drama at least going on with that. And wipe away what I don't like here. Okay. That's doing that, that's twisting, that's popping out better. I'm going to get back and look. I'm much happier with it. Maybe what I need to do is, now that I've put in the darks, I think I need to put in the lights even more. But I also need red, because I like it. Some of this bold red, some of the soul red. Okay. See, I started going a straight line. I said, no, I can't do that. So just wipe some of that out so that it's not so predictable. It also looks like, the translucent part, how you can see stuff through the grapes. And that's real technical, but you can see things through the grapes. So that's what I would do to fix this. So I hope in this segment that I have encouraged you to go out and just get a bunch of grapes and sit down and try it. Give it a shot, see what happens. You can let it dry, you can keep trying, and by the end of the painting, you'll have something that you really like. You just got to keep practicing. I don't think that I have this huge raw talent as far as, I really don't. I don't think that I was born with this talent of I could paint anything. Actually, I had probably more of a talent in music. But where I do have talent is that I don't give up and that I practice and I paint every single day. And that's really where my talent is, in my perseverance, and that I keep going. So if you want to paint something, whether it's grapes or a Harley or your grandmother, or whatever you want to paint, just give it a shot, go do it. So now what we're going to do is talk about some of my failures and how I get past them in this segment called, What Was I Thinking? So let me get this photograph out and show you. Hey, Ed, can you take this one? Yeah, I'm happy. He's happy. Okay, good. Okay, let me bring this board up. Hopefully you guys can zoom in on this painting. And I'll talk to you a little bit about this cat. The basic setup, I really wanted to get the entire still life. I set it up with my grandmother's coffee pot. My sister had given me this cat, my favorite kazoo, and I have several. That's another segment, and some books. So I set this up with some of my favorite things. And technically, as far as how the painting was painted, it's fine. It's technically good, but there are a couple problems with it. The biggest, and I never was happy with it. When I first painted it, I didn't understand what I did wrong. Now I do. A painting has to be either warm or cool. So when you're mixing your palette, these guys are all warm. The blue and purple and green, they're all cool. You have to decide, make a conscious choice. Is my painting going to be warm or is it going to be cool? It can't be on the fence. This one is split right down the middle. The background is cold, the foreground is warm. It's schizophrenic. So it's like, okay, I thought about throwing it out, but I liked it. And I thought, well, what can I do to this thing? So what I did was I actually I have a bigger set of these. And I went over the painting and I said, okay, is there anything I can do to save it without having to even paint? That would be great. That would be the easiest way. Want the instant gratification. So I went like this until I found a segment that I liked. And what happens is by shrinking this down, you get a painting that is predominantly warm. You can have cool elements, but it's got to be one or the other. So Ed, there's a painting on the top of that. If you could bring that over. I want to show you what happened when. Now what I did was I shrunk the painting down. I cut it up. In fact, I'll take it out of the frame so I can show you. Out of there. Is it going to go? Okay. So you can see the sides, how they're painted. It's not that I took meticulous care to paint it. It's where I actually cut it, re-stretched it over some smaller stretcher bars, and I was able to save this painting and make it something, because now it's predominantly warm. Even the shadows here, I kept some of the warm areas. So now this painting, it works. It's a happy painting. So I love it when I can save some of these. Sometimes I can't, and if I can't, I'll show you in another episode and we'll just throw them out. It's okay to throw them out. They don't always work. Okay. Thank you. Now, did anybody have any questions? Let's put people on the spot. Thanks. Okay, since we do have a little bit of time, I think I'll keep working on the grapes till the end. And that one.
This one?
Let's do that one, yeah. This one will show more progress. Here you go, Ed. Thanks.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you're working on, say, these grapes, how are you deciding what's a good composition? How are you deciding what should pop out, what should go behind?
That's a good question. Like in this case, the photograph pretty much decided for me, for the most part, that the light source was here. So everything in the light, I wanted that to pop, and everything in the shadow, I wanted that to recede in the background and have pretty much lost edges. And so that's how I determined what was going to be predominant. However, in the photograph, there's about 8 grapes here who are the star, and you can't have that many cooks in the kitchen. You gotta, just like you gotta decide whether it's warm or cool, you gotta decide who's gonna be the star. So I think in this case, I'm gonna take a look at one of these guys and say, all right, one thing that I did in the other painting that I probably shouldn't have is I picked this whole area here as my focal point. You really want to get it into a third, not right in the middle of the canvas. So yeah, it was in the middle of the canvas, but I thought I could get away with it on this long format. So there are things where I know the rules and I break them anyway, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't ever learn unless I push it just a little bit. So certain things that you can't do or you'll be in trouble is to paint oil over, or acrylic over oil, because your paintings will crack. But beyond that, rules where it's just a compositional thing or a matter of taste, it's just a matter of what do you like back. And so when I'm looking at this, besides the light source, I tend to get favorites. Who is my favorite grape? And They are like little personalities. Well, obviously I like this guy. He's got a lot of light here. The only problem with him is he is pretty much smack dab in the middle. So I probably shouldn't have him be as the center of interest. I like this guy too. I like what he's doing there. And I'll put a little, I think what I'll do is focus on this area here. And not this one, because then it's just like too much of the same thing. I'll put him in the background with a warm. I mean, that was like too much, so you wipe it off.
Is this still the glazing you're doing now?
This is actually, that was sort of a glaze, and there's also a scumbling where you take the brush and you go right over the top of it when it's dry. So glazing is when you thin it down significantly and go over the top. Scumbling is where you take a dry brush and just kind of scrub over the top with hardly any medium at all.
I have a question.
Yes?
How many times do you have to let the painting dry before you can continue?
That's a really good question. The question was, how many times do you have to let the painting dry before you can continue with it? Well, when I'm on the roll, it might only have to let it dry 2 or 3 times. When I'm having difficulty, it could be 10. It just depends on how the painting's going. So I would say a typical painting, and if I wasn't worried about getting it perfect for the show, maybe 4 times. That would be a good average. A good example is this Santa Claus was glazed, and he was probably done in 4 sittings. And this is more of the Sock Monkey was more of a scumbled application, and he was done, except for the little pom-pom guys, in less sittings. So that he was more of a direct application. This was a lot of glazing over and over and over. His face, I treated his face and I painted his face the same way as the grapes. So over and over and over and over and over. And it's not that you have to, it's a matter of me getting it to a point where I liked it. There are people who are action painters who sit down in one sitting and create beautiful pieces of work. They do plein air work, and they do it in one sitting, and that's their style of painting. I am more of a contemplative painter, where I like to paint, sit back, have some coffee, take a look at it. Yeah, I need to do this. And so as much as I'm a high energy person, my painting style is very contemplative. So it depends on the person. But yeah, I would say about 4 times. And this one, when I take this back, I'm going to make myself only go back to it once so that I don't overblend it. The other one, I think I went back too many times and I took out some of the richness, some of these beautiful strokes that are in here. Like this. This is just done on the first setting, and that's just gorgeous right in here. I'm really happy with that. The whites are a little too stark, but you know, you can either use a paper towel, you can use your finger, you can use a brush, you know, just have fun with it. So thanks for coming to Give Your Walls Some Soul. Oh, we still have 5 minutes. Well, then I'm going to keep painting and put some more highlights in until the very end. Okay, even on this, and we talked about cutting in some of this, even on this place where you'd really just want a little bit of light here, I'm doing it in a broken line and kind of a squiggly line. Because first of all, a straight line, just like things in a straight line are boring, a straight line of a highlight is boring. This shows that this has some texture and some character. That even went out of the lines. You don't have to stay in the lines. You just make a new stem. That's just how the stem goes, you know. The only time I have to be precise is when I'm doing portraits. So if I'm doing grapes and I'm not doing a portrait of somebody's favorite grapes, then I'm not worried about it. You know, the stem can do whatever it wants. Okay, so there's that, and now it's floating right now. It doesn't have any base, so I'm going to take some purple, which you wouldn't think to put as a base, to help anchor that. That's going to be some of the dark. Again, I'm starting and stopping. If I were to do a straight line, well, I'll show you. It's really boring, and it looks plastic, and I don't like plastic. Okay, so now I'm going to try and take a brush that doesn't have too much on it. How about nothing on it? And so that's the thing. You go over your work, you can just scribble it out. It's like, it's okay. Didn't hurt it. Yes?
What kind of brushes are you using? Are they bristle brushes?
For the most part, I use synthetic bristles. I also tend to like, and also synthetic sables. These are filberts. The shapes of these are rounded, and they're fairly short and stubby, so you do have a little more control. Let me see if I have any brights. I have one bright. I don't use brights too often. I don't use squared off brushes too often because I'm not looking for that kind of precise thing. I'm more of an organic painter rather than somebody that is doing something that's really linear. So these are filberts, and these are brights. See how this one's squared off? The shorter amount of brush that you have between here and here, the more control you have. Now that's dangerous to give me something with a lot of control because then I'm going to get too tight, I'm going to get boring. So I purposely go to things that have a long distance span between here and here. I use fat brushes. I know my shortcomings and I use the tools that are available to me to help me overcome them. And so it's, I forget who they were talking about going to the moon and how they made it to the moon. It was just a series of adjustments. And I think that every painting that I do is a series of adjustments until one of two things happens. I either love it or I can't stand working on it anymore.
Throw it out.
And then I go on to the next one. Either way, I have a ball. So that's how it works. Okay, so instead of being worried about it, just give it some soul, put it down. Oh yeah, that's happier. Got some of that going. And you know what? Let's say you put that down and you were just scared. All you got to do is wipe it out. Well, thanks for joining us today. It was really fun to be with you, and I hope you can come for our next episode. Thanks. Thanks, Ed. You were a great MC, and David Heboy on the guitar. You guys did a wonderful job.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us today. And please keep your eyes peeled in the newspaper for Shannon's number 2 in the series, when she'll be working with the same photograph, but dealing with the silver pewter cup, if I remember correctly. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.